So here we are at LUX3D's first live stream. Hopefully everyone can hear me. This is the first time I'm live streaming, and so I'm just getting my bearings. So stick with me if there are any technical difficulties, and I hope you guys enjoy. So what we'll be doing is we'll be doing a variety of kind of creative experiments and challenges. We'll be doing some things that are very art focused, some things that are design oriented, and just hopefully having some fun and getting into the creative process. So I have a few things prepared, and if anyone is interested in me doing anything specific, I'm going to be giving some opportunities for user participation. But let's jump in with our first thing. We are going to be firing up my 3D printer. So I have a file ready that I'm going to show you guys. It's a design I made in Fusion 360, and it's actually going to be for my streaming setup. I'm going to be mounting one of my cameras on a 3D printed object to give me just the right kind of viewpoint for the camera, and also to not obscure my screen, because it is on a traditional tripod, takes up a lot of room in front of my screen. So let me jump over to my first other view. So now you should be seeing a Fusion 360 file, which is my CAD software of choice. And in this, you'll see that I have this design, which I've mocked up. And basically, it's made to be able to mount to my desk using this screw, and to have this kind of scaffolding that still allows me to see through, because this is going to be right in front of my main monitor. And so I wanted something where I'd be able to see through these holes and still see everything on my screen, but something that was strong enough that it wasn't going to vibrate and shake around as I was doing stuff. I also knew I needed a tilting mechanism for where the camera goes. So if you can see in here, there's these kind of two mechanisms on the side with a bunch of teeth, almost like a gear, but it's meant to just lock that platform in at whatever angle I set it to. And so I'll be 3D printing some parts of this during the stream, hopefully getting it all made, and so we can take a look at it. If not, we'll be picking up on that next time and hopefully using it as part of the live. So a lot of the things I'm going to be doing are building something during one stream to be utilized for the next, and it'll kind of be an ongoing thing. You get to come back and watch things be progressed along their path. So I'm going to bring up another piece of software that I use specifically for 3D printing. And so this is called Prusa Slicer, and it's a great slicing software, not just for Prusa printers, but for really any printer that you can hook up to it. And it lets you preview your design and your parameters in a way where you can kind of predict what's going to happen with your print, make sure it does exactly what you want it to do. So right now I'm just scrubbing kind of through the layers, so you can see this is exactly what will be printed layer by layer over the course of the next, looks like 2.5 hours is how long this print's going to take. So that'll be about the length of the stream, and then you'll be able to see that part, and then next week we'll be making some more parts and putting it all together. So I'm going to go ahead and hit send to connect, and that'll bring up this printing dialog, which I'm going to bring on the other screen, and just set this to print. And then in a few minutes, once it's gone through the printer startup process, I'll jump the camera over to the printer so we can actually see what it's doing. And we'll take a look at it every once in a while as we're doing some other stuff. So that'll run, and I'll just jump in here for a second so you can look at this a little closer. I want you to really be able to see this mechanism, because this took a while to get it dialed in just right. I had to make several prototypes, which I'll also show you in a few minutes. but I had to basically get these teeth kind of just right so that they don't collide into each other in the print, but that they would be able to move against each other but lock into place when needed, so that the weight of the camera doesn't actually cause this to move, but it just sits right where I leave it. And so that took quite a bit of dialing in, because if you've done 3D printing before, you know as it's pressing down the filament, it can start to kind of bleed one line into the next one. And so you have to get just the right tolerance so that these parts don't actually merge into one part. And so it's kind of like a little bit of a Goldilocks and the Three Bears situation. I had to print one model that was way too loose, one model that was way too tight, and then kind of met in the middle and found that Goldilocks zone. So that's what you're seeing here, is each of these layers is a part of the design that the printer will extrude one layer at a time, and this lets you preview that process. So here my printer is starting up, and hopefully in a couple minutes we can check in on it live, but I'm going to switch over to back to my top screen as my main screen, and we're going to take a look at some of those 3D printed prototypes that I've made. So what I did is I split out just the kind of mechanism of this and was able to print it just to see where my tolerances were. And you can see this one is really loose. It just freely spins, which is not effective for what I want, because I want it to be able to hold in place so that when I set the camera at a proper angle, it just stays where it's supposed to be. This next one, I adjusted a little too far in the other direction, and it printed so tight that those layer lines I showed you earlier actually fuse together, and this one can't move at all. It's basically one solid structure. And so then I adjusted kind of halfway between those two, and this one works perfectly. You might be able to hear it actually click as I move that. So that's those little gear teeth kind of locking into each other and staying just where I need them. And luckily I was able to do this as a print in place, so this all goes on the printer as one piece and is able to print without any support structure in there. And so you can make some pretty cool mechanical stuff with print in place techniques, because you could make kind of complex geometry that has some moving part without having to connect two parts later. So those are those prototypes, and we will be looking back at that printer in a few minutes. Another thing that I'm going to be doing on streams is I'm going to be showing you some of more artistic side of things. So in front of you, you see this origami flower, and this is a design I worked on several years ago after doing a lot of kusudama, which is a type of origami. And after studying a lot of other people's designs, I was able to come up with this flower design. And it's made of two unique modules that link together with no glue, no tape. Just the shape of this spiral is actually what holds together the entire design. So there's a lot of kind of architectural thinking that goes into origami that I was exploring at the time. And I haven't done these in many years up until recently, and kind of fell back in love with them recently and was able to create them in a new way that makes it kind of more efficient. So I'd done some of these for some weddings, and obviously in different colors than kind of Halloween colors that I have here. This is what I folded for Halloween. But I can do them in all different colors and different paper materials to get different effects. And so here's some green modules, and these are actually the two different modules that get folded up and linked together to be able to make this flower. So the basics are, these get now, instead of hand folded, what I've been doing is I've actually been using my laser to score these patterns into the paper, and it makes it so I can produce a lot more of these modules a lot quicker. because when I did this years ago, it was so slow to be able to get enough of these out to actually make enough flowers to be presentable. So with my new laser, I'm able to score these pretty fast, and we'll actually take a look at that as well in a few minutes. And then I'll be making some more of these modules and linking them together to make one of these flowers. So sounds like my 3D printer might be close to firing up. So let's take a look real quick what stage it's at. Yeah, so right now what it's doing is it's calibrating the first layer. So it's basically just going through and sensing where the tilt of the bed is, just to make sure that when it starts laying down the first line of filament, it prints it perfectly. For those who don't know, first layer adhesion on a 3D printer is basically whether the whole print is going to succeed or fail. If you can get a good first layer, get that good contact of the filament pressing into the heat bed, you're basically going to get a good print from then on. So it's just probing on the bed to make sure that it's flat, and if there's any inconsistency in that height, it's going to be able to record that difference and remember it and adjust the print as it's going to make sure it gets a really nice smooth first layer. So it'll do that for a little bit longer, and then it'll start its heating phase, which will take a few minutes, so we'll check back in on it in a minute. So I'm going to jump back over here, and we're going to take a look at the files that help generate this pattern for the laser. So I'm going to move Prusa Slicer out of the way. I'm going to move Fusion 360 out of the way, and we're going to look at another piece of software that I use. Now, this is a piece of proprietary software for my X-Tool M1 Ultra, which is the laser we're going to be using today. And this software lets you bring in any sort of pattern or design that you've made in a 2D design software and set it up so that the different various laser parameters get accessed to this design. So you'll see here I have a set of lines that are black, and these are set to be a fine point blade cut. So the M1 Ultra is nice because it actually has several other tools besides a laser, including a series of blades that you can use to cut out paper or leather or various other kind of flat media and flat stock. So today we're going to be using the fine point blade to cut these sheets of paper out from a larger sheet, and then we're going to be using the laser at a very, very low power setting, which is in this case 15%, to score out all the lines of these, so that when the finished thing comes out of the laser, these folds will basically fold themselves. And you'll see that later. It becomes very, very easy and reliable to make sure these folds are exactly where they need to be. So when the shape collapses up, it sits exactly how it's supposed to be for the next process of curling, which we'll also get into in a little bit. So actually here the 3D printer has reached its kind of final stage and has actually started printing. So let's jump back to that for a second so you guys can see what that first layer looks like and why that adhesion is so important. So you can see it's drawn out essentially the first path of that design, and when we were in Prusa Slicer you could see some of that, those different layers, and I'll jump back to that in a little bit when we get a little further along so you can explain a little more of what's happening. But basically it's, if you think of the design and whatever is sitting at the bottom, this is drawing a perimeter path and then filling it in, kind of like if you were to sketch on a piece of paper what the floor plan of that design is. It's just drawing the outline and then filling it in with shading. And so that'll be going for the next, as I said, about 2.5 hours, and we'll check in on it periodically to see the progress it's making. I also might leave it up in my secondary window so that you guys have something to watch while I'm setting up some other activities. So that'll look like this. That way we get to see the progress as it's happening. So while that's going, let's see if we can get the laser fired up as well and get some multitasking going on. I'm a big fan of multitasking. I like being able to work on a variety of projects at the same time and kind of jump between them as my kind of mood shifts and as the needs of whatever project shift. I like to be able to have many projects running in a given day and kind of work around wherever I see is most needed or what mood I'm in. As an artist and a creator, we have to follow our passion, and if we get too bogged down in one project, it can become kind of a dredging experience. And so being able to switch from another project gives yourself some headspace. When you revisit that project later on, you usually have kind of a new perspective on it after not seeing it for a while. So I'm going to go ahead and start this laser process. So I'm going to jump off the 3D printer and we're going to look at this software one more time. And what we're going to do is, all these settings are already in there. I've set that up ahead of time. At some point maybe we'll do a kind of deeper dive into settings, but I just wanted to have this ready to go so that we can jump right in. So I'm going to hit this process button, and what that's going to do, it's going to start to connect with the laser, and it's going to give me a little preview of what the laser is going to do so that I make sure it's doing exactly what I want it to do. So we can watch through that preview. It's a little slow, so we're going to speed it up. Maybe speed it up all the way to like 10x. So it's cutting the perimeters of the paper with the pen, with the fine point blade, and then it switches tools to the laser, and it will draw out those lines with the laser to make sure it's scored just enough, but not burned all the way through. So now that that's good, I'm going to start this up, and I'm going to switch over to the actual laser so you guys can see that as well. So here's the laser. So it just moved into position, and I'm just going to clear another object I left on the bed. With lasers, you want to be safe, and so you want to make sure you don't have anything extraneous on your build plate while you're cutting, because you don't want to start a fire. So I'm going to close down the hood, and I'm going to turn on my air purifier, which is also a really important safety precaution to have. It might get a little loud. Hopefully it won't be too distracting, but it's really important when you're cutting certain types of materials to purify the air, because some of these materials can be toxic, and you want to be able to protect yourself and protect those around you. And so the air purifier sucks out all the air from the inside the chamber, purifies it, and then sends it out the window, and sends it out clean enough that it's not going to do any real damage. Luckily with paper, it's pretty low toxicity, so we won't have to worry about it, but I always like to be safe rather than sorry. So now the print laser is ready to go. We got a little error, so we're just going to go and fix that error. It happens. But we're just going to try this one more time. And I'm going to hit start. Okay, and that was successful. So I'm going to go press the start button on the laser itself. And we'll get to watch that do its thing. Now this will only take about 2 minutes, and what it's going to do is cut out the 4 sheets of paper necessary for the next set of modules. So that's what it's doing right now. It's doing its cutting phase with an actual physical blade, and it's going to go around that pattern 2 times because I just want to make sure it's cut all the way through. Usually once is enough to get all the way through, but I always like going through 2 times just because I don't want to have a little spot where the blade might have not made as good contact and have to tear the paper. So I'll just let that work its way through. And while it's doing that, I'll put that on my second window. And I'll show you some of what happens after those modules get made. So here are the 2 different modules that go into this flower. And they look pretty similar, and they are, but they're a little different. You can see this one's a little skinnier than the other. And what that does is it makes these kind of bigger spikes on the outer perimeter and this center little spiral in the middle. It's a little hard to see on camera, but yeah, there you can see it. And it will be even clearer with kind of brighter colors than this black and orange. So the way to do these, and to do several types of kusudama that have a curler, which is the type of module this is to curl it. So what I like to do is I use these kind of needles from Fabric Crafting World, and I just twist the paper up onto it. And I'll just do kind of a light curl at first. Sometimes I won't even start with this. I'll just take it by hand and kind of physically turn it up into place and just get the paper's memory to start to engage with that curl. So what I mean by paper's memory is paper is made up of a lot of little fibers pressed together. And when you start to fold or curl those fibers, you know, obviously you can see that it starts to hold that shape. And so I call that the paper's memory. Because after years of a flower staying in this shape, even if you were to take it apart and flatten it out, it's going to pop right back into shape, because all of those fibers have been maintained in that form for so long. I'm just going to do a little curling on this now, just so you see what it looks like when we start to curl these shapes up. And then we're going to go back over to the laser and get those sheets of paper out so we can see what it looks like right after it's lasered. So you can see this starting to take this curled form. And as it gets more and more curled, it'll get more and more similar to these shapes that you see in here, and then we'll be able to put it together. I'll actually, just so you guys can get a sense of this, I'm going to take one of these modules out so you can really see how this thing comes together by taking it apart. So if I remove one of these modules, you'll see that it's just an individual piece, and it's actually one of these that's been fully curled. A little hard to see with the dark paper, but we'll be able to see more as we go. So that's one of these, and you basically, as with the other one, you just curl it up a little bit at a time. You don't want to move too fast with the paper because it'll crease and kind of break or tear. So you want to be gentle with it at first until that memory starts to kick in and it starts to learn the shape that you're trying to get it to. One of my big kind of inspirations and guides in my art is from my father, who always said that you're having a conversation with the materials. And so you don't want to dive into this conversation too quickly. You want to treat it gently, kind of introduce the topic before you go too far and scare it away or tear the paper. So I'm just going to gently introduce these curls a little bit at a time, kind of do them and undo them. And as I do that more and more, the paper will learn what I'm trying to tell it, and it will remember it, and it will stick to that shape. So you can already kind of see this spiral starting to form in there. Alright, we'll just keep on reintroducing that spiral a little bit at a time. And as we do, it'll remember more and more of what we told it and take on that form. Alright, I'm going to set this one down for a second. We're going to go grab the other paper out of the laser. weeding tool to just pull up a little corner, make sure we got everything we need out of this. So I'm just going to lift up this corner until I see that this edge is basically folding itself. So that's how I know that the laser was strong enough to get that edge, but not so strong that it's just going to straight burn through the paper. So we're going to lift all four of these up, and we'll go back to our main table, and I'll show you how to fold the patterns from there. Close this back up, and since we're not laser anything for a sec, I'm going to turn off the filter so we get a little more audio clarity in here. Alright, so here are those 4 sheets that we just cut and scored on the laser. And what we're going to do is, you'll see, once again, there are kind of 2 different patterns. They look pretty similar, but one of them's a little wider than the other. I'm going to take this first one, and I'm just going to go ahead and start to introduce those folds. And you'll see they kind of fold themselves. At a certain point, you'll see that crease just collapses on itself without much effort. And traditionally, if I was folding these all by hand, it would take a lot longer to do this precisely. I'll show you how one looks at some point. But doing this in a way that's efficient to be able to make enough for several flowers at a time really becomes necessary to have some sort of equipment to help you out. I have folded a few hundred of these at a time before, and it is exhausting. So I like finding ways to be able to kind of hybridize workflows between analog and digital. You know, there are some artists out there that are completely analog and swear by it and don't like using computers. My father was one of them. So I was trained very classically in most techniques, doing things by hand and doing things in traditional kind of processes that have been learned over long periods of time. But I also like finding ways to incorporate those processes with digital processes and kind of using the right tool for the right job and the right part of the right job. So I really, really like when I can combine some digital aspect of software and modern manufacturing with some good old classic hand folding or hand crafting techniques. So here's that first module that we folded up, and you know, over time it'll become more curled, and then eventually with at least 6 sheets, 3 of each module, you can make one of these flowers. And I'll pull out some of my other flowers at some point so you can see the different kind of colors and ranges of other styles you can achieve with the same technique. So I'm going to just go ahead and get a couple more of these modules folded. While I'm doing that, let's also check in on the 3D printer and see where we're at with that print. Alright, so I'm going to just leave the printer going up in this corner so you have something else to watch while I'm folding these. And it looks like it's, you know, maybe an 1/8 or a 10th of the way through. So we'll just keep on letting that go. That's the other nice thing about digital manufacturing, is you can have several things going at once while you're working on assembly or some other part of the process. And it's pretty fun to be able to have a lot of these things going at the same time and just jumping back and forth between them. Alright, so let's get a few more of these set up. Let's see how this fold really kind of just folds itself, which is super satisfying. If you've had to do it the hard way enough, the kind of feeling of watching that fold just find itself its natural place is quite satisfying. And if there's anyone watching who has any questions about any of the things I'm doing here, feel free to ask in the chat. I'd love to, over time, make this a more kind of user participation stream. Really see what your guys' thoughts are and let you share your preferences for maybe, the next color I'm going to use or what type of project we're going to work on today. I really want to be able to have a conversation with you guys and make this like an interactive stream. Alright, so we have several of these modules set up now. We can start to curl some of them, but I think what I want to do is set up one more color, because these flowers look nicest when there's some contrast in the color. So I have some green kind of petals set up. Let's pick out another color, and also I'll just show you some of the other modules that I have already. So here's another completed flower. Some blue and purple. But we're going to pick out one more color here. Just give me a sec while I grab these out. So here we have a bunch of different fun colors, and these are Astro Bright. It's a really nice set of colors because they're very, very vibrant. Give a little shout out to Astro Bright here. Not a sponsor, but maybe someday. So I really, really like these colors just because they're so vibrant and they have the right kind of weight for me to be able to fold. So these are 24-pound paper, which is basically right on target for what's good for folding up this type of origami structure, because it will be strong enough that it won't tear, but thin enough that it won't bundle up as I'm curling. So here you can see kind of range of colors that we have to work with. I've already used several of them, so there's a few colors missing from the set. But let's just pull out something that's going to be a nice contrast with this green. And if anyone in the chat has any suggestions of color they'd like to see, at some point just feel free to let me know. And we'll do another set of colors with some user participation. But for now, I think I'm going to pull out something in this like pink range, because it'll have a lot of high contrast with the green and kind of be a traditional kind of rosy flower. Alright, so we're going to go set up this pink sheet into the laser, fire it up, and we'll continue folding. So I hope you guys can hear me when I kind of jump over to the laser. If it becomes hard to hear when I'm over at the station, just let me know, and I'll adjust my microphone so that you can hear me as I'm doing my other setups. But here we are inside of the laser, and so I'm just going to lay down this ruler, which kind of acts as a guide for me to just get the right spacing. Then I'll lay down my sheet of paper. I get it centered and aligned right up to that edge of that ruler. It's a little tricky sometimes because it's a sticky mat that's underneath it. It likes to stick before I want it to. Alright, there we go. I'm going to lay it flat. I'm just going to use that same ruler just to kind of brush along it to make sure it's really stuck down flat. And then the edges pull up as it's cutting. again, sorry if that's a little loud. I will be getting my audio set up hopefully better over time. Oh, okay. Yeah, so I can see you guys have a little hard time hearing me when I'm over at that setup. I'm going to switch my mic mode next time I jump over there and see if I can get a little bit better sound. But let's go ahead and we're going to hit process again. I'll switch over so you guys can see. So here's our completed job from last time, and it's nice because it lets you know exactly how much time it used. So just under 2 minutes to get 4 of those modules folded up, and it would have taken quite a significant more time to do that by hand. Just for a single module would have definitely taken maybe 10-15 minutes just to get one of those modules folded up traditionally. So I'm able to make maybe about 10 times more units per hour if I'm going to be doing a lot of flowers, and that really adds up very fast. It's also very draining to do the hand folding process. I will show it to you guys at some point because I also want you guys to be able to fold up your stuff if you want to follow along. But so I'm just going to hit finish here. I could have hit process again, but I'm just going to come back and reprocess just to make sure everything is correct. Because it does these little pre-checks before it actually fires itself up. And I just like to do that because it lets me know everything's correct, all the distances are measured correctly, everything is safe and ready to go. Alright, so that's ready. I'm going to switch back over to this view so you guys can watch this while we work on some other stuff. I'm just going to fire up that laser. I'll be right back. Alright, so while that's going, let's get a few more of these modules ready. And we can start, once they're curled up enough, we can start linking them together, which is where the real fun part is. So I'm just going to go and lightly curl these. I'm just going to try to do them pretty fast and light, just so they all have a little bit of that memory we talked about earlier. These big flaps, I like to start them a little bit by hand, just to introduce the general direction that it's going to have to curl up into before I go to this tool, which it can be a little bit of aggressive. So once it's introduced that first time, then I can use the tool, start reinforcing that curl. I'm going to go through all these modules just lightly, just to get it curled up to this position. You'll notice that in these, they're very, very tightly curled, and that takes quite a while to get it to memorize that curve enough to be able to hold that shape. So I just want to go through each of these kind of rough, just to get that initial form in, and then come back to it and do a secondary round to get them really tight. So in the chat, I was asked about if people with little hands can curl these. Definitely. Probably even easier because some of these modules and some of the flowers, sometimes I make them pretty small, and it becomes really, really hard with my hands and my fingers to be able to get that size. So let me pull out one of the smaller ones here. So you can see here's a fully, oh, this is black. Let me see if I can find another one. Yeah. So here's some white modules. This is basically the smallest size I would go. You can see they're quite a bit smaller, almost about half the size of these larger modules. And when you curl these little guys, having small hands is definitely a benefit. Um, you know, I like to curl the bigger pieces. I have some really, really big ones that I did years ago. This is from 12-inch paper. Um, so these are definitely a lot easier with those bigger hands. And I've made a couple of flowers that were smaller than these petals, but it's so difficult. So yeah, definitely recommend, if you want to get into origami, having smaller hands is only going to help you. So I'll put this one away for now, and let's continue doing these. But thank you for the question, and like anyone who wants to ask a question, feel free to do so in the chat. I will try my best to pay attention to them as they come in. I'm just going to go ahead and curl up the rest of these really quick. I'm actually going to put the tool aside for a sec. Just do these by hand for a minute. Once again, just to softly introduce the general direction of the curve before I put any tight stress on the paper. The paper likes to bundle up a little bit when you try to move it too quickly. So I like to be a little gentle with it first. Make sure I don't tear it. Make sure it doesn't bundle up. Alright, so we got 3 of these started, and well, 4 of them. So let's make sure I do the other modules too, because you need an even number of each module in order to link it into a flower. Do a couple more of these thin ones. You'll notice I'm curling all of these in the same direction. Well, hopefully you noticed. So I curl them all clockwise, and that ensures that all the spirals will fit together. If one of them is curled counterclockwise, it won't fit. Now sometimes I do make specifically counterclockwise ones, but I generally do them clockwise just because then I know they'll all fit together. Sometimes you'll see me just pick up the tool out of instinct. I've done so many of these that it's almost second nature. See, this is one of the examples when it's this small, my fingers are just almost too big to even try to curl it. This little flap, I can't even get, in there enough to be able to hold it while it curls. So that's really when I need this tool. Sometimes I'll even pull out an actual little sewing needle to be able to get these little flaps as tight as possible. I'm trying to make sure this is going to play to camera. Am I ever afraid of ripping? Yes. So somebody just asked if I'm afraid of ripping the paper. Yeah, it happens quite a bit. Over time, I get better at kind of feeling the paper out. Like, I don't even need to really look at these when I'm doing them. For the most part, my fingers kind of just know the paper. And so I can feel when, it's in too much stress. Although, as I said, with these little ones, like this area, right in here, this will rip pretty easily. And it happens quite a bit. It's not enough to damage the whole thing and make it unusable. But there is a lot of stress going into the paper as it's being curled. And so even if I'm gentle, that area is very likely to rip. I try to avoid it, but if it happens, it happens. I know it's not going to ruin the whole design. You can see there, actually, it just did rip a little bit. A little hard to see on camera. Um, but I do have a lot of modules where if you looked at the bottom of it like that, they'll be ripped. I rarely rip it so hard that it's gonna like destroy the entire piece though. When I was starting, I definitely did. You know, I had to learn how to be gentle with it. Once I finish this one, I'm going to run over to that laser again and grab our results out of it so we can start on some of the pink modules. That way we can just see a little more contrast when we start curling these up together. But we're starting to get to the point where this is looking like the completed module that you can see in this flower. I'll pull out the other flower as well, so you can see the different colors. It becomes a little more clear. I also want to get a little more light on this situation, so I'm going to bring down the secondary light here. Hopefully that'll make it a little clearer for you guys to see. Let's get this angle straight. That one's not quite given enough light. Unless you really get it in here. Yeah, that's helping a little bit. I'm going to try an even stronger light. Yeah, okay, now you can really start to see that spiral coming down the center. And just how these are linked, all with these spirals. Probably going to try to get us a better lighting setup for this next time, but as I said, this is my first stream. Kind of learning as I go, learning with you guys, figuring this out together as we go. So let me go ahead and run over to that laser and grab our pink modules. Switch you guys over so you can see. And I'm going to try this other button on my mic, and you guys let me know if you can hear me a little bit better now when I'm over at the laser with the mic switched to this mode. Hopefully that makes it a little easier for you to hear me when I'm over here, so that when we're doing projects on the laser, I can let you know what we're doing. And I'll probably get a dedicated mic for this at some point, or a lavalier, just so you guys can always hear me no matter where I am in the shop. Once again, I'm going to pull this corner up just to the point where I can see that it's folding. And see, it didn't quite fold as easy as the green paper did. What I've noticed is the different colored papers kind of react to the laser in a different way, because the laser has its own light spectrum, and the different color kind of gets in the way sometimes. I'm sure I can look into the science behind that a little more. That may be a fun thing, is to kind of understand which colors are more reactive to the laser and which aren't. Maybe we'll do a little experiment on that during one stream. So hopefully you guys heard all that. Yeah, so it sounds a little far away. Yeah, so what I was saying is, like, if you look at the pink paper that was just scored, and when we tried to fold it, notice that it doesn't fold up quite as easily as that green did. It kind of takes a little more effort to get it right on the line, whereas the green just almost folded itself. And that what I've discovered is that because the laser has its own spectrum of light, when it combines with the color of the material, it may not go as kind of deep into cutting those fibers. And I'm wondering if that's maybe the chemistry of the paper or the reflection of the color. So it'll be interesting to kind of do a stream where we study that, where I try a bunch of different colored papers and we see which ones react more. And when it reacts less, we just need to turn the heat, the power up on the laser a little bit more to get that to cut through those fibers. May also have to do with the fibers themselves and how they weaken during the dyeing process of getting those colors onto the paper. Because generally they're just fibers that get dyed either at the fiber stage or once the paper is made. So I'm wondering if maybe the different dyes kind of break down the fibers at different rates. That may be why some papers seem to respond stronger to the laser than others. But it'd be great to set up a chart where I've broken down, here's the right laser setting for the right color paper. So if I go to our view where we're looking at that software, and I go back to the design file, right now I have this set at 15% in terms of power and 200 speed. And so what I've discovered is kind of warmer colors or darker colors tend to need, well actually no, I'm sorry. Warmer colors and lighter colors tend to need a little more power, but it seems inconsistent. It really seems to come down to the individual color. So it's hard to kind of say for certain, hey, I did this on this color, it was this amount of darkness or this kind of part of the spectrum, and then reliably say, oh, that setting will work on another color. Seems to be something going on there. So it'd be really cool to do a whole stream where we just experiment, really figure that out, and nail down the science of it. Alright, so we have now a pink and a green version of this module, and this will let us get to the point where we can start linking these together, which will be where the real excitement is. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get one of these completely curled and one pink completely curled, and then I can show you how the linking process works between the two. Angle this light a little differently. A little too much glare. Yeah, that's nice. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and curl this one up. And let me switch over to my other camera so you guys can see this a little clearer. And I'll put the print in the other so we can see where we're at with that 3D printer. Yeah, so it looks like that's about maybe a third of the way through printing at this point. That's pretty fast. I'm trying to get a little closer so you guys can really see this. Might get out of focus. Let me adjust the focus real quick, because I really want you guys to see how this curling process works. Just stick with me for a second here. I'm gonna switch this over to autofocus and see if you can really see up close with when we curl this. Yeah, that's nicer. So what I'm just doing is slowly twisting with my fingers along this tool so that paper wraps around it and we get that nice tight curl in there. And if we just keep on kind of uncurling and recurling, the autofocus is a little much. Let me just try to dial in this manually. Yeah, okay. So we've gotten this pretty tight now. It can get tighter, but we're limited by the thickness of this tool. I might grab one of my sewing needles at some point, but I'm just going to do this one by hand for now. So I'm just going to kind of pinch along this edge, just to give us a really tight starting point, because it needs to be very tight at the beginning, otherwise it'll just get looser and looser as we go. So I'm really just going to pinch that edge down all the way along, and then start to roll it between my fingers. And roll it back. And roll it forward. And just keep on reinforcing that curl until it's nice and really tight. Looks like kind of a spire, maybe like a Disney castle or something. So one thing I'm trying to do is learn how to play to the camera, because I'm used to doing this on my own space, and just kind of zoning out with it, but trying to give you guys a good show here. And it's definitely interesting doing this stuff while streaming. It's a very different experience. And hopefully over the next couple weeks, as we do this more and more, start to get some more people and some user participation. I think that's when it's going to be really fun. It's when we can all interact with each other and explore these creative projects together. Getting this one pretty tight. Like with the last one, I'm going to set the tool down. Just kind of come in here and pinch this edge. Gotta pinch nice and tight so you can really get as tight a curl on this as possible. And I see my friend Matthias86 has just entered, and hopefully we'll introduce him at some point, but I'm glad that he's here and able to watch this. Yeah, so we've gotten that curled up nice and tight. Now just the last leg. So all these modules have 3 kind of linking legs that stick out, get curled up, into a nice tight spiral. And that's what allows them to connect to each other. Once again, no tape, no glue, just the shape of that spiral lets them link. So once we get these two pink and green modules all set up, you'll be able to see how that works. It makes a nice strong link. No worry, Matt. I'm just glad that you're here and able to see this. Alright, so that's looking pretty good. I'm going to set this one down and come back to it once we're done with the green one. So I'm going to grab our green one. This one's almost done. I'm just going to give it a couple more tight curls just before we start linking. I really just want to get it to that point where it's pinched very, very tight at the tip. And that way, as I start to curl it, I can keep the entire spiral tight. And it takes quite a bit of kind of muscle memory to be able to know how to treat the paper just right so that it can curl nice and tight without tearing. Let's get ourselves in focus again. Yeah, so that's pretty good. Nice tight spiral. I'm just going to do one more just to really get it dialed in. Yeah, see, that's nice. You get like 3, almost 4 full rotations in there. And the tighter that spiral is, just the nicer the ending piece ends up looking. Set this down. That's looking pretty good. So I'm going to unfurl a couple parts of this and just put a few more accent curls in there. It just makes the shape pop a little more. So I'm going to put one up on this top part here. Just makes it look a little more organic, like how a petal does, where it kind of curls over on itself in some places. Yeah, just captures the light nicely against that curve. And it also just holds these spikes a little further out from each other, which by the end of the flower ends up just making, in my opinion, kind of a more attractive presentation. So it lets you see all the different parts of it. Alright, so this module's looking pretty good. The paper has kind of gotten to the point where it's a little bit more flexible, a little less stiff. And those shapes just kind of hold themselves in place a little bit more than when we started. So I'm just going to go back to this other one, this pink one. Just do one more final set of curls into it. Really get it as tight as I can. put a little crease right in there. I like to do that towards the end of the curling process. If you do it too early, it kind of shifts and drags as you're curling. So I usually like to get it almost as tight as it's going to be before I put that crease in there. That way that curl has a place to sit right in the edge of that crease. And then I'll put some of those little accent extra curls on the top of that petal. Once again, just to give it that little bit more sense of this is organic, more natural. And just captures a little bit more light on the edge, really makes it pop. Do one there. I'll do one on this tip too. And then I'm going to kind of take this and give it a little bit of a pinch right along here. I'm not going to crease it. I'm just going to pinch it into place so that I can really get this curl all the way to that pinch point without actually creasing the paper. Same on this side. And that's just going to hold the shape really nicely when we have the end of the flower. So these two modules are now ready to link to each other. And here's where the kind of magic of this happens, is once these spirals are interlocked, they really hold pretty tightly. And that's why we don't need any glue or tape for this design, which I really, really like. I really like that it's just the structure and the shape that allows this design to work its magic and hold itself together. So you can see those two spirals are now starting to link into each other. And as they do, they'll become kind of more and more secure. And once again, just kind of reinforcing that spiral shape through both of them so they get familiar with each other, kind of hug each other. And then they're linked. And now, if we pull at them, they're pretty connected. And the more of these that we link together, the kind of stronger that bond will be. And we'll start to get some really attractive looking contrast between the two. And I don't know if we'll complete a full flower on camera today. Might have to come back next week to see this one get finished. But we'll do a couple more modules here. We'll also just check in on some of our other projects that we're working on. I'd like to keep this kind of a variety show and just jump around between different things that I'm working on, explain how they're made, let you guys see the process. So we'll grab another green one here. Make sure we grab the right one. There's a certain kind of order to which ones you have to link to the next ones for the shape to work out. I'll just grab this green one. Just start curling it up. And try to get closer to you guys so you can really see the process. Once again, feel free to ask any questions in the chat about any of the things that you're seeing me work on, or any things that you saw kind of in the background. You know, if you missed the earlier part of the stream, I have something going on my 3D printer back there, which is going to be part of a new camera mount that I'm working on. And so we'll get to that again a little later if you missed the entry of the stream. tight spiral there. Let's see how much focus I can get to you guys on this. Just give me a second here. Let's get this right up against the camera. Focused in. Yeah, there we go. Alright, I'm going to try doing it on the right up against the camera so you guys can see in full detail what this looks like. So I'm just positioning this needle right along the edge, basically straight flush along the edge, and just kind of pinching the paper up against it. And then slowly just twisting and kind of rolling the paper and that needle in my hands. And when I feel it start to buckle, like it's starting to buckle there, just pull back. Let it kind of flatten out and rest. And then just kind of reintroduce that slowly, just so it doesn't buckle or tear. Like I said earlier, you got to be delicate with it. And just kind of slowly introduce that spiral shape. And then keep on undoing it, reinforcing it, giving it a little bit of a pinch. Letting it roll up. And over time, it gets more and more introduced to it. And as I said earlier, it gets that memory, right? It starts to remember where you want it to be. All those fibers in the paper start to take on that shape. And if it stays that way long enough, it'll never kind of come undone. Yeah, there you can really see the nice kind of spiral spire nature that we get. Really has kind of an organic beauty to it. So I love being able to kind of mimic some of the natural forms in nature, especially fractal forms. So a lot of my art, I try to incorporate some sort of fractal element. And this is one of my favorites because the spiral is kind of the most obvious fractal. For those of you who don't know, fractal is a shape that repeats itself in smaller and bigger iterations, kind of to infinity. Spiral's a really good way of showing off and kind of understanding fractals. We'll definitely get more into fractals during other streams. But there you can really see that spiral kind of taking off. Come down to this small one. And yeah, you know, earlier it was asked about tearing the paper. So here you can definitely see this little bottom corner has torn just because there's so much kind of torsion force in that spiral. And there's already the score line from the laser. It just makes that edge rip a little bit. As long as it doesn't continue all the way up to the top, it'll be fine. One thing I'm going to do on this one, just like, because these are so small, it's hard to get into, just kind of roll the needle on the inside edge. Which just softly introduces the direction of the curve it needs to go in. You can see that kind of pinching a little bit just to get that rolled over nice and tight, and then as it gets pinched, it's a little easier to roll it between your fingers. Just kind of push on one finger, pull on the other until it gets all curled up. And then just use the needle to kind of smooth out any buckling or sharp points. Let's put that little extra curl at this top of that point. Just keep on rolling it back and forth until it starts to learn that curve. Alright, nice. And we'll put that last little crease in there to kind of lock it in place. Let's grab our other modules. Now we can see what 3 pieces linked together looks like. And the more pieces we link, the kind of more full this flower will feel, closer to something recognizable as a flower. It also gets kind of increasingly hard to get the next piece linked because you have more paper than the previous ones in the way. So this can actually be quite difficult when you have flowers with a lot of modules and when they're small. So I basically just use this needle to just guide the 2 pieces together until they both pop into place. And just kind of stir them around a little in there to make sure they're linked all the way down the spiral. Then I can take those 2 green ones, just move them up a little bit more, give a little more room. And then I can grab them and just give them a little twist by hand to reintroduce that nice tight top point at the top. Yeah. There we go. I'll let that set down in the leaf a little bit. So that's starting to look like something. Not quite a flower yet, but definitely something interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and take these kind of side leaves. These I feel like represent like almost the thorns of a rose, or just extra petals or leaves that sit on the outside with the rosebud. So I'm just going to curl those up as well. And that'll make an even stronger connection, because when you're done, each link will have 3 points, and it makes a triangle, which is structurally kind of strongest shape you can make. Come from a bit of an architectural background, and so as architects or in the engineering process, we always try to create triangles because they're very rigid structural shapes. Alright, so this is starting to come together. So we have 2 of the green modules, 1 of the pinks. I'm going to curl this outer part a little bit more over. So those little extra curls on the tops of the petals or the leaves just give it that extra sense of organic. Let the light find a place to kind of pop off from. Alright, let's set this down for a moment. I'm going to refocus the camera. There we go. And we'll take a look at that 3D print and just talk a little bit more about that. I'm going to set some curling stuff aside just for now. We'll come back to it. And we'll talk about some stuff that's a little more engineering focused. So let's jump over, take a closer look at this print. It's looking pretty good. I'm going to see if I can zoom us up even a little closer. I haven't really prepared for that, but it would just be kind of nice to get a close-up look at this. Yeah, alright. So I'm not going to be able to zoom into that too much now. I don't really want to move the camera because I want to give kind of that clear perspective. But what we can do is look a little bit more at the CAD model. And that'll let you guys take a closer look at kind of how this shape was developed and what it's going to be used for. So I'll just move the 3D print over to the secondary camera. And actually I'm going to move just straight so we can see the screen. Next time I'll get a setup where you guys can see the screen and the 3D print. But as I said, this is just my first stream. I'm still learning how to manage the process as we go. It's a learning experience for all of us. I'm going to bring back Fusion 360 over into this window so we can really explore this shape a little more. So this is the whole camera mount once it'll all be printed, and I've divided it into several pieces to make it a little easier to print and also to make some parts that print better in one direction than the other all work out a little bit better. It also lets me kind of test one part at a time, make sure it's working before I commit to the entire big print. I'm going to zoom in here. And so we're going to take a look at the different parts. So I'm going to turn off all of the parts except for this kind of top area. And we're just going to inspect this part a little bit. So this is where the actual camera will be mounted. You can see there's a little hole here. And that's for a kind of cold shoe mount or any type of mount with this little screw to be able to go through that tiny little hole there and just make sure that our camera is secured. So there's a little under area under that hole that has enough room for one of these little thumb screws. Just go through that hole, get the camera tight in there, and then once the camera is mounted to that hole, this whole mechanism here can kind of tilt up and down. And it uses these little teeth at the edge of this knob. Bring the camera right up on that. So these teeth interlock with each other, but there's just enough play in them that it can free rotate. So earlier I showed you some of my kind of prototype models, and I had to kind of test the tolerance of it. I use an analogy of Goldilocks and the Three Bears here to say that when I first printed it, it was kind of way too loose. Get my focus dialed in for you again. So this is kind of way too loose. It just kind of free spins, which isn't what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something that has just enough tolerance to barely be able to move, but once I set it in place, I want it to hold firm. So that's what those teeth are meant to do. So first design, way too loose, right? Or like Papa Bear or Mama Bear, it was too hot or too cold. Second design actually is this one, and this one I overcompensated, made it way too tight to the point where the filament actually fused as it was printing, because the filament's heated up to a very high degree, and then once it's pressed up against itself, it can actually fuse with itself, which is mostly what you want it to do when you're printing. But in this case, it completely locked this shape in, so it can't move at all. And no matter how much strength I put on it, it would probably break the entire part before that gear loosened up. So then I split the difference, found the Goldilocks zone, and this one works just right. So this lets me kind of click to the angle that I need the camera to sit on. Camera will sit right there. And as I rotate this, wherever I leave it, it'll just kind of stop at that angle. And that'll let me set the camera and adjust the angle so it gets just the right shot that I'm looking for. And the camera's not that heavy, so when it's sitting on this, it won't kind of collapse the thing down. I may make some with some even stronger teeth, just so it really, really has a lot of hold. But as I said, it's a very tight tolerance, so it's hard to get that dialed in. But I might try again. I like improving designs over time, even if I reach a point where they work. I find little things over time that I'm like, oh, I can make that better. So I like to always revisit projects after a while, stepping away from them, and just see where they can still use some improvement. So I'm going to jump back over to the CAD for a sec, and we'll take a look at some of the other parts of this. So the teeth is definitely the most interesting thing from a design perspective, because it's mechanical. But there's some other good design aspects that I did here. So I have these little plugs just to be able to hold the shape together. I use a variety of little joinery techniques. Some of them are actually from traditional joinery. These are just little pegs that I use just to make sure that the next part can link in. So I'll turn the next part on and turn this part off. Oops. Well, here, before I turn this part off, you can see these teeth a little better here. I'll turn that off now, and we'll take a look at this part. Is kind of the scaffolding. Right, this was what's going to hold the camera up to the right height on my desk, so it gives me just the view I'm looking for. And I just put these little cross braces, once again, in design for engineering purposes. We always try to incorporate triangles. They're very rigid shapes, and it'll make sure that my camera doesn't wobble around or shake as I move around the room, get any extra vibrations. Then down here, connecting to the next part, I have this little dovetail joint. And that's from traditional kind of woodworking. So that's an example of where knowing the kind of traditional analog processes of manufacturing can really help even when you've moved over to digital, because you have that understanding of how these things work. So putting this dovetail joint means I can split the print up further, make sure each piece is kind of printed in the right orientation. It's really important with 3D printing, especially when you want to minimize the amount of support structure that you're using, is to get all the pieces oriented in a way where there's less overhangs, because those overhangs will require support, and it's more time for the print. It's also more wasted material. I try to be aware of the kind of waste involved with my processes, have a lower footprint. I do use filament that's, as far as plastics go, a little more environmentally friendly. It's called PLA, and I really like it because it's very easy to print with. It's very reliable, and it's also partially biodegradable. Now, no plastic is going to be fully biodegradable. All of them are going to have, some remaining, but PLA has some properties in it that allow some of it to decompose, and so it's just less plastic in landfills. I also basically keep every shred of extra filament and waste filament that I have. I don't throw it away. Eventually I'm going to get a filament recycler that you can take old used filament and put it in, and it will give you a new line of 3D printed filament. So I've been actually collecting old filament scraps for years, just because I don't want to throw them away. I don't want to put more plastic into the environment if it's not necessary. So let me actually Since probably a lot of you don't know much about 3D printing, I'm going to go ahead and grab a spool. Alright, so switch my cameras, get myself focused again. There we go. Alright, so this is what 3D printing filament comes when it looks like. It's on a spool. You basically take one end of this spool and feed it into your printer. Heats up the filament to whatever degree is necessary for the type of filament that you're using. In this case, PLA. So I have this set up to get to about, let's see, usually we're in the range of, I'm just going to check so I give you an accurate number. Yeah, so right now I have this stuff set to print at about 230 degrees Celsius. Which is pretty hot. If you touch the hot end of a 3D printer, you will lose your fingerprint pretty quickly. So once again, safety. If you get into 3D printing, those hot ends get extremely, extremely hot. Let's see here. So yeah, you know, this filament, this roll is about 1 kilogram. I get my filament from two different companies. One is Printed Solid, and the other is Prusa. Prusa actually bought Printed Solid not that long ago, and so I find their filaments are very reliable. I really like their company kind of ethos and their brand. So shout out to Printed Solid. Anyone interested in getting filament, reach out to them. Not a sponsor, but I just really like their company. I like the way they operate. They're in the US. They make all their own filament in-house. They used to source some, but they've been really focused on making their own filaments, and I really appreciate that when companies are kind of their own supply chains. This is mostly what I've been using nowadays, Printed Solid filament, or Prusa, which is the manufacturer of my printer. So I know I might sometimes kind of ramble around, jump from topic to topic, as I think of something that you guys might be interested in. But let's jump back into this CAD model and just explore the rest of it. So as I said, this is kind of the scaffolding part, lifts the camera up to the appropriate height. And then the next part sits below that. And what it does is it allows that scaffolding to hold on to my desk. So I have a few desks and a few built-in workbenches here in the studio. And this part is going to mount to actually one of the workbenches. And it's just going to allow my camera to sit in the perfect place. Excuse me. It's going to allow my camera to sit in the perfect place when I do get my front-facing camera set up. So I'll be printing out the rest of the parts for that, and hopefully next stream we can actually get that front-facing camera working, and we can have a bigger look at the rest of the studio and what some other things look like. But basically this is pretty self-explanatory, or should be. You know, this is going to be on the kind of front edge of the table, and this screw here will tighten up and lock it into place. It should get pretty tight enough that this camera is kind of stable and doesn't jitter or shake around when we're recording. So a CAD model like this is fairly simple overall. The basic modeling of it took maybe, I don't know, an hour. And then after some of these 3D printed prototypes, just doing a little refinements here and there, testing out the different components, making sure it all works before I commit to the whole design. And I'll probably keep on refining it over the next couple months, figuring out new things and new kind of attachments I want to make. Maybe make something similar for a mic stand or a microphone arm. I'll be doing a bunch of industrial design projects on the channel and during stream. I have a couple that I've already done that I'll kind of do retrospectives on. I just want people to kind of understand the process that goes into designing and manufacturing something, whether it's more on the artistic side of the spectrum or something more industrial like this, where it has very specific output and use case. So I have a few other projects that I've done that I'd love to be able to explore with you guys and kind of walk through what it's a day in the life of an industrial designer, which is one of the many kind of hats I wear in my career. So I want to kind of jump between like more artistic things, exploring my own personal artistry, some other artists that I work with, and also kind of professional oriented, industry oriented projects. Occasionally I'll be able to show you guys actual client work. And I have a couple clients who have given me permission to basically show little bits and pieces of what I'm working on for them, so you guys can get a deeper understanding of how these industries work, and how several of the things that you might use in your everyday life, what goes into making them, what goes into designing them. Especially with 3D printing, I feel like we're heading towards a place where having a 3D printer accessible to you is going to be much, much more commonplace. And eventually, as the form factor of 3D printing changes, as the accessibility and the cost barriers to entry come down, I imagine we'll see 3D printers actually in everyone's household. And I've been saying that for about 10 years, knowing that we're probably still a few more decades away from it happening. But I see it as kind of an inevitable development. In the same way that when computers or even telephones first were introduced, people said, oh, well, this will never be in everyone's home. And then we know that gets proven wrong very quickly. And before you know it, those new technologies are so accessible and so affordable that basically everyone who has a home is going to have one of them, at least in more developed parts of the world. But eventually, everyone has one at least accessible to them within like a local library, which many local libraries now have their 3D printers. And with some training, you can go to your local library and be able to print something out for yourself. So I just see them being a way of kind of bringing manufacturing back to the local environment, back to your neighborhood, and being able to produce more of what you need in-house. It's really great when like something in my house breaks, and instead of having to go to Home Depot or call up a repair, I can just go in, design something, print it out, and in most cases be able to fix something within a couple hours to a day and be back up and running. So I imagine in the future, once 3D printers are kind of either in everyone's house or very locally accessible, instead of going to, for example, Walmart to buy glass or whatever kind of household thing you need, if you break glass and you need a spare one, you won't have to go to Walmart, but you might go to walmart.com and you might download a model for a glass, and you'll have a glass 3D printer that just prints out a new glass for you. So I imagine that's ultimately where kind of the future of 3D printing will head. I don't know how long it will take to get there, probably a few decades till it's fully implemented, but I like leaning into those kind of trends and just kind of being ready, and kind of understanding what the underlying mechanisms behind these equipments that will one day be more and more part of our lives. So I've been doing 3D printing for probably close to 10 years now, at least personally having my own printer. been aware of it, and I think the first time I had access to a 3D printer was in college, and just kind of fell in love with learning about them and using them, and being able to come up with an idea, and within a couple of hours having that idea potentially be able to come to life. Versus, when I've been involved in manufacturing projects where we have to use large scale factories, it could be months before I see a fully realized version of a design, be able to hold it in my hand. And that's really hard, as a creator, to have something that you imagined and work on, but not be able to hold it, not be able to see the fruit, come to bear of all the efforts it took to kind of think about it and design it, bring that artistry to it. So there's a lot of things that I'll just kind of think of and just jump in and start designing in CAD, and set up for a 3D print. I'll definitely be showing more of those projects over time. And anyone who has a project they'd like to see me do, if you've been dealing with something where it's like, oh, I could really use, some sort of fastener or hook or something that holds two parts together. Actually, my friend Matt, who's in the chat right now, he has a few projects in his house where he's wanted to have, for example, like a whiteboard, and come up with a custom way to hang that whiteboard. And so that's the type of thing that I would love to be able to do for people, is like, hey, you have this problem, you have this thing that you need in your house, and there might not be anything in the marketplace that you could go to Home Depot, but you might or find something on Amazon, but it might not fit just right. And so I really like the idea of you guys bringing me your kind of industrial design problems and saying like, hey, I have this thing, I want to use it this way. And there's no way for me to be able to really do that with any like aftermarket parts that exist. And then we can come together, we can discuss the project, and I'll make it live for you. And we'll just explore the problems together and figure out how to make it work. So that's something I hope to do more and more over time, over stream. So if you're watching and you have an idea of something, next time I jump on streaming, definitely shoot me a message. Let me know what your kind of project or problem that you need to solve is, and we can have a little kind of interactive live stream where we get to work on a real problem together. Just looking in the chat, seeing if anyone else. Okay. So somebody asked about, this is actually another friend of mine, Nectar Strokes, is asking about just noticing how when I think of origami, I think of paper folding. And the curling part sounds more like paper molding. Yeah. So, there's a lot of traditional things in origami, very old techniques. A lot of people are familiar with like folding like a paper crane. And I've done a lot of those kind of standard origami models. And it was definitely a good thing to learn the process on. But I definitely see origami and paper folding and kind of molding or sculpting as a much broader conversation than just standard origami. There's a lot of people who start off with the traditional origami who have moved into move the kind of understandings that you get through paper folding and molding into other fields, like architecture. If you look at some of the forms of like Zaha Hadid or Santiago Calatrava or some of these other architects, you can definitely see that they had some inspirations through playing with paper and discovering its properties of folding and molding. There's also like people who have worked for companies even as big as like NASA, Robert Lang, and I forgot there was another father and son team who worked for NASA and brought a lot of the mathematics of paper folding to some of the ways that some of the space modules need to collapse and unfold, so that it can be sent up in a small form factor and then expand, especially for things like satellites. So it's definitely really interesting how origami can apply to other kind of industries and other techniques beyond just, oh, let me fold an animal. Um, but it's really useful to start with those basic understandings of how do I take a square sheet of paper uh, flat and turn it into one of those animals, because it teaches you kind of the properties and mechanics of it. And then you can apply those to all kinds of other things. As I said, like architecture or engineering, and I'm sure there's countless other applications. I've even seen some in chemistry and biology, using folding science and math to be able to fold proteins to potentially make like disease curing treatments, by manipulating the way that protein cells fold on each other. So there's a lot of interesting applications of origami beyond what you traditionally think of when you hear the word. Um, so that's something else I really like doing, is exploring where we kind of have some sense of familiarity with a certain subject matter, and we think, oh, we know what origami is. And I like kind of breaking out of the mold of what is traditionally thought of as that like origami or some other technique, and discovering new applications and new uses. I recently started getting into leather craft, which I'm really excited about. I'm not quite ready to actually make something on camera for it. I want to get my skills a little sharper, but maybe I'll show you a little bit of that. Actually, this piece right here, this is a 3D print that, oops, this is a 3D print of my logo, that is intended for part of a leather piece. And so all the little holes at the edge are actually holes for a piece of leather to be sewn into this design. So maybe we'll get to that in a following stream. But let's take another look at this 3D print. Yeah, so we're about 3/4 of the way of this print. So I imagine it'll be done in maybe another half hour to 45 minutes. I could go and check on the printers for the exact time, but we'll just kind of let it go in the background. We'll jump back in with a little more paper folding. I'm just going to go ahead and pull out these modules again that we were working on earlier. And we'll just get another one of these folded up. And I'll leave the printer running in the background so you guys can see that. So let me get the camera focused up on us again up here. Yeah. So, like I said earlier, the pink material doesn't score on the laser quite as easy. So this fold isn't finding itself the same way that the green paper did. And we'll look into that further and do a little science kind of experimentation on that. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to fold this one in the way I would traditionally do it if I didn't have the laser, just so you see what that process looks like. It'll take me quite a bit longer to do it, so I want to make sure I do it exact. But just so you see what that traditional kind of more origami style process looks like. It all has to do with kind of figuring out angles to use from this starting square shape to work in from that square and find a way to collapse it into the shape you're looking to make. So in this case, we're going to start from this corner down here. What we want to try to do is get it to fold kind of in thirds. And that's going to be a bit tricky to do because you can't really measure the thirds of an angle unless we had like a protractor or something. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, if this is 1/3 of this angle being 90, each third is going to be 30. And then what we know is that if we extend that third angle of 30 degrees out to the edge, it's going to basically sit halfway along that edge. So what we're going to do is we're going to use that edge to make kind of a mark. So we're going to fold down in half, and it's not going to quite hit. Originally when I had this design, I did have it right at the halfway point. And same thing with this one. This one actually may be closer to the halfway point. Let's see. Yeah, that one's still pretty much on point. So I've adapted this design every once in a while. And especially when I moved to the laser, I kind of found a way to tweak the design in a way that would make a much more effective end shape for the flower, but would have been very hard to do, to discover how to do by hand, just because the angles are a little different. But we are going to be able to use this as a kind of anchor point. I'm going to check if this one works too. Yeah, so these 2 points, basically halfway along these 2 edges, these are going to kind of be anchor points for us to set up the rest of the shape. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold this in half, but not crease the entire paper. Just going to fold it in half and kind of mark right on the edge, but just creasing right along that edge, but leaving the rest of the paper open. And do the same thing over here. When we open that up, we can kind of use that as a target, right? So we know that 1/3 of this angle being 30 is going to end up basically hitting at that point. It's going to be a little bit off, but it's going to give us a close enough thing. And luckily we have our laser lines to be a guide as well. Yeah, so it's quite a bit off. When I had the original design of this, that's basically how I would do it. But I shifted this over because I found it made an overall better design at the end. So I'm just going to use the laser line as the mark. Kind of guide myself to be able to score this line in. I'm going to see if I can do this one just by hand and eye, which I wouldn't be able to do without the laser line. Yeah. And anyone interested in learning more about origami or paper folding or just kind of paper manipulation, and as Nectar Strokes mentioned, paper molding or sculpting. If you're interested in learning more, I can provide a bunch of resources, different books you can look into, different websites that have a lot of models. I'm not going to get too much into all the details of making it, but I want to give you guys enough that you can kind of build on, and if it seems like something you'd be interested in doing, I'll give you some resources so you can go find out more. Alright, so now that we've had these folds scored in by hand, with a little assistance from the laser, I'm just going to collapse this shape up into the correct form so it's ready to curl. And there we have our kind of three-legged module. So I'll start curling this up. Same way we did before. Let me see if I can come up near the camera again, get us focused so you guys can watch. Going to turn it in clockwise. Just keep on pulling gently till we get a nice tight curl. You'll see buckles a little bit, but we'll smooth that out later. Oh, I'm gonna apologize to anyone who's watching on Instagram. It looks like my feed might have gone down there. So as I said, it's my first time streaming. So these things are probably pretty par for the course. If you just give me a second, I'm gonna try a little something here, see if I can get the Instagram people back up. Alright, looks like that's not going to work, so I'm just going to continue. And I'll see if I can get Instagram worked out a little better next time. So we'll just continue here, rolling this paper, getting it curled up. Yeah, nectar strokes. I'll get it perfect one day. No, I think there's something to being willing to be imperfect, especially on camera. I think perfection is tricky for artists, so we always want to try to get things perfect before we show them. Um, but I think there's a lot of value into being able to explore and expose process, because I think you learn a lot more as a creator, and you give your audience a chance to learn a lot more about what you're doing if you're willing to show the kind of messy details of the creation process, because it's never easy. It's never straightforward. You always find yourself making a mistake, and sometimes that mistake actually leads to like a happy accident. You discover something new through that mistake that you can use. And then, yeah, it also kind of gives the audience a sense that maybe they could try something too. That it doesn't have to be perfect. That they can try something and maybe not be the best at it at first, but keep on working at it. And I think a lot of people feel like they're not artists, and that they couldn't do it because they see other art and they're like, oh, I can't do that. And even as somebody who's basically been doing art their whole life, I'll still see people and be like, whoa, I don't think I could do that. But it's always worth a shot, especially if you see something and sort of like, I don't know if I could do that, but boy, would I like to. It's worth a try. And you really got nothing to lose by trying. And the more you do it, the more you'll get better at it. So give yourself some grace at the beginning. Let yourself experiment. Let yourself fail. Let yourself learn. But I do appreciate a little bit of pressure, because it helps me try to get better. You know, the art of streaming is something I'm just starting in, and I'm sure over time I'll figure out more and more things to make this a more entertaining, more educational experience for everyone watching. But for now, I'm just happy to be able to do this kind of stuff and share it with people in whatever form it takes. Alright, so there we got our second pink module. Go ahead and link it to the rest of this flower. As I stated earlier, as you link more of these, it kind of becomes harder and harder to get them in, just because you're fighting against more layers of paper. But I basically just use this needle to kind of slowly guide it along. Sometimes I'll need to actually open up the whole design, kind of uncurl it a lot to be able to get it in there, especially for these smaller flowers. Yeah, so this one's pretty tight. What I'm gonna do is just gonna open up this entire thing, lay it back flat, and it has enough of that curl that it's introduced, that it's formed that memory we've talked about, where the paper fibers have learned the shape that they're supposed to be in, and so they'll find their way back to it no matter what. So we'll just start with kind of all three pieces aligned, and then we'll just slowly reintroduce that spiral to all three at once. It'll make it a lot easier for the whole thing to become linked up. So now we have two pinks and two greens. Generally, we need at least one more set of each to complete this form. I can actually, let me see if I have some others that could go in. Otherwise, we might finish up this flower next time. Been going about 2 hours here. Think I'm gonna wrap up soon. Probably let the 3D print finish. It's at about 87%. I'm gonna go ahead and set this down for a second. Actually, just speed up the print a little bit. So luckily, once the print has started, you can actually access the speed parameter. Just kind of crank it up a little bit. I'm not going to go too high. Maybe about 110%. Just so that finishes up a little bit faster. But let's check it out where it's at. Yeah, so we might catch a little glimpse when the printer moves. You can see somewhat when the head gets to the side. You might be able to see a little of the hole forming, which is basically the top and the end of the print. So yeah, we're at 88% on that. We'll let that finish up. And I think we're gonna do one more project. I'm gonna do a little something else different. You might have noticed these cards here. So these are actually my card, my business card. And these are lasered on metal. And it makes this really pretty attractive kind of card. You know, most business cards out of paper usually just get thrown away. And so I wanted to have something that people would, once they held it, once they had it in their hands, they wouldn't want to get rid of it. And I really feel like these metal cards do the trick. Pretty durable. This is actually one of my thinner ones. So I started getting some thicker ones that I like even more. You can see they barely flex. And got a bunch of different colors. So I made a bunch of these a while ago and have just kind of run out of all the different colors and pieces that I bought. So I'm going to go ahead and get our laser set back up. But this time, instead of going on paper, we are going to take some of these metal business card blanks that I have. I'll show you how the blank ones look in a sec. And we're going to make me some new business cards so I can start handing them out. Hopefully, people will start scanning that QR code. I'll get a few more people watching the stream. So if you just give me a minute, I'll let you just watch this printer going in the time being while I set up the laser for these business cards. So I just wanted to show you what these blanks look like. So I got some blue ones, I got some more black ones of this thicker variety. Bit more durable, less flex. These, if you really bend them quite a bit, they can actually break. They're also very thin, so I noticed they're a little sharp. I wouldn't want anyone to get cut on one of these. So these are a little more, kind of the thickness of a credit card. They're actually the same shape and size of a credit card, so they'll fit perfectly in somebody's wallet or their pocket. And they're a bit thicker, so even if you really get pressed up against it, wipe against it, it's not going to cut you. I don't want to hurt anyone. So I got these blue, I got some black. You can see in the little preview window, I got some of them loaded up in the laser. I'll just pop this final one in, and then we'll get back into the design software so you can see the laser setup for these cards. Let me just jump onto this view. I'll put this last card in. Close the hood. And you can see each of these cards is fit into this jig, and I designed this kind of custom jig. I was doing one card at a time and just wanted to get more efficient. And so I took a piece of, this is actually coated MDF, it's not real wood, but I took this piece and cut out this template so I could pop all the cards in really easily, get 12 of them made at a time, and just be able to load in 2 or 3 different colors at a time, get variety of colors for the cards. Notice some people are more attracted to other colors than others. So I always like to kind of fan them out in front of people and let them choose their favorite color. Let me grab our X-Tool design software here. And I'll switch up so we can take a look at this. So this was our laser file for the flower modules. I'm going to switch over to another project where I have the design for the back of the card. And there's a new design that I just got ready where I've been able to incorporate my logo into the QR code, which I was pretty excited to be able to do. So I'm just going to zoom in so you guys can kind of see that a little clearer. You can see right in the middle of the QR code I have my logo. And I'm pretty happy with that, how that turned out, because it feels like it's a natural part of the QR code, the way that it flows into the shape. And it's still completely scannable. So I was pretty happy when that ended up working, because I always wanted to have a branded QR code, and they can be a bit expensive because most places will charge you per month to hold on to it. So here I have, 12 of these cards laid out in the design software. And I have all the settings dialed in for this project already as well. So it's this part where it says ignore, that's just the template to make sure I have everything aligned. And then I'm running the laser. It's 20-watt laser, just so you guys know, which isn't that high powered. It's just kind of enough to get the job done. Anything like 10 to 20 watts will do a project like this pretty easily, because you're really just removing the top layer of paint or coating from the metal to reveal the raw metal color underneath. So we'll see that happen with these blue cards. There's a very thin coating of blue on top of the metal. You might be able to just make out a little middle layer where it's just raw, kind of uncoated metal. So we'll just be, essentially, the laser will be kind of scratching off that top surface. And that's what we'll see as the design. So I have this laser, the 20-watt laser, set to 30 power, so it's 30% of that 20 watts. And it's not exactly, you know, it's there's always some loss of power as the laser is kind of traveling through the tube. So you don't get the full 20 watts out at the end, but that's the kind of potential power that you're working with, is 20 watts. So I'm going to go ahead and align this. So this software has its own kind of unique alignment tool that's actually pretty good. There's a camera alignment tool, but I noticed it doesn't work as well. And so the first thing I do is I do an auto measure, which measures our height from the laser to the surface it's hitting, and that helps the laser dial in its focus so that the beam is the most concentrated point where it's going to actually touch that card. If the laser is defocused, you'll notice that the edges aren't as clean, or you'll get some more burning, or you won't just get any result at all, because if the laser's focused too high or too low, you're not getting that concentration of energy where you want it. So I'm going to just run over to the laser real quick and get the auto measuring ready. And I'll switch over and let you see basically what it does. So I've lined up this like kind of little laser target. This isn't the actual cutting laser. It's just like similar to a laser pointer, just a little preview to help you know where you are. So I've lined that up over one of the cards. And when I hit the auto measure in the software, it's going to send down a little probe, and that probe will measure the height from the bottom of the distance of where the laser gets shot out to the actual card. And that's what tells the beam kind of how narrowly to focus, and that'll set the right distance so that it hits that focal point right at the top of the card. So the next step I have to do, jump back over to the software. Next step I have to do is I have to set our marking, which makes sure that the design is aligned to where the cards are actually going to sit on the X and Y axis, basically left and right and front and back of the machine. Because we don't want these cards to have the design sit off center. I like it to get like nice and tight right into the center of the card. So they have a pretty unique process to be able to do that, where you mark off corners of your design, or in this case of the template, and that lets you really get the design exactly where you want it. You know, it's not 100% exact. I've measured, but it's within such a tight tolerance that I'm happy with the way it looks. As I said, there's a way you can do alignment with a camera, but it's just not accurate enough to my liking. I think it's gotten a little better over the years with some of the software updates, but it's just not to the point that I can rely on it to be consistent. So I'm going to go ahead and do this marking setup. I'm going to use the rectangle setup, and I'm going to hit start marking, and I'll go over to the laser. Let's give you a full view of that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send that little crosshair mark that we can see. I'm going to put one dot, essentially, right in this upper corner, right at the top corner of the top card. Once it's pretty perfectly aligned, it might be a little hard to see on camera. There's a little marking button here I'll press. And I'll move it down and over to the bottom corner on the other side. Do the same thing. And then when we jump back into our software, you can see now we have this rectangle here that represents the two corners that we created and the full rectangle that spans those two corners. So So now that we've done that, we can hit end marking and done. And now we'll be able to see how tightly our design template lines up with our physical one. And so it looks pretty close on first glance, but if we zoom in here, we can see it's a little off on this edge. I'll zoom really far in so you can see that it's just not quite aligned. It's close enough for some people, but I'm a stickler with those kinds of things. I really like making sure it's right on target. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab our entire area of our design, and I'm just going to move and drag it until I see these little guides pop up. See those blue guides that show up when I get it just in the right place? So here, if you look at that little center square dot, that little blue center square, there's no guides on it. And as soon as I get it into place, that guide pops up. That lets me know that I'm right on target. And that lets me know that my design will sit exactly where I want it across the cards. So I'm going to go ahead and, actually, before I do that, our printer's finished. So let's check that out really quick. So we missed the very end of the print. I'll try to time that better next time. But here's our 3D printed object. And when the print finishes, I usually give it a few minutes just to cool off. As I said, the printer gets really hot. The bed gets hot. So I'll usually let it just cool down for a second before I pop it off. So that'll give us just enough time to go start this laser job. Alright, so now that we've gotten our alignment set, we can go ahead and hit process over here. And once again, we can it's just doing a little calculation. All right, so it's calculating this is going to take an hour and 25 minutes. So unfortunately today you guys won't get to see the results of these. You know, basically they're going to look like this, except blue and black. But next time when I'm on stream, I'll have a bunch of these cards made and we can look at them together. I'm going to go ahead and hit start. Well, actually, let's do that little preview. All right, so you guys can see kind of the steps that the laser takes to make a design like this. So when I hit play, you'll see the laser starts moving and it's basically scanning from left to right, and wherever it realizes that there's a bit of the design, it fires the laser for just usually a fraction of a second. We'll speed this up a little bit. So you can see it's starting to find the edges of that design, and it just turns the laser on and off whenever necessary along that line, wherever it hits the design. So it basically breaks your overall design into a bunch of little thin strips, and then just goes one strip at a time. We'll speed ourselves up even more here to 10x, even 20x. Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff for this to do, which is why it's going to take an hour and 20 minutes. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of scrub through this for you. All right, so it's just going to add one of these little thin lines at a time. If we zoom way in here, I don't know if we'll be able to zoom into the right spot until we get this far enough down. Yeah. So zoom way, 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 way in. And you can actually see each of those scan lines that the laser does. Basically just going one line at a time, left to right. And wherever the design is, it turns on. And wherever the design isn't, it turns off. Let me zoom in a little more, just make sure if you're watching on a smaller device, you can see that. Yeah, so there you can really see each of those individual little lines that it's going to engrave. And when you see the final thing, you know, it just looks like one solid thing, but it's actually a bunch of little lines that were close enough to each other. The thickness of the laser kind of overlaps itself. So we'll zoom back out and we'll start this process up, and I'll jump over to the laser. And I'm going to turn my purifier back on. Make sure we're safe. This is a little more toxic to deal with than the paper is, so I always like to make sure I have my purifier on for here. Sorry if it's hard to hear me from over here with the purifier on. All right. So that's starting up. It'll take a second before you really be able to see anything clear on it. And with the hood down, the hood is also like a protective feature. That kind of orangish color just protects your eyes from the laser light. Nothing to worry about when you're on camera. None of the danger transmits through the camera. But just to make sure I'm safe and anyone else here in the studio is safe, keep that down while it's going. Yeah, so you can start to see little bits of it showing up. Like I said, this is an hour and a half to get these 12 cards done. So I'm not going to make you guys wait all that time to see them done. We'll take a look at them next time when we're on stream. It also gets a bit loud, so hopefully that's not too bad for you guys. But let's while that's going, let's end the stream off with a little look at our 3D print. So we'll pop over to the printer. And I'll go ahead and pull this off of our bed. I'm actually going to pop the bed up, off, and you'll see it's a flexible bed. And we'll just move this whole thing over to our table. We'll take a look at this built surface. So this is a steel powder coated surface from Prusa. They're kind of my favorite 3D printing company. Not a sponsor, maybe one day. But this is their satin powder coated finish plate, which is my favorite one to print on. Just because it gives you nice smooth results. You get really good bed adhesion on that first layer, and the print just comes off so easily. It just basically falls right off when it's done. So this is our end part, and we'll take a little closer look at it in a sec. Serves its purpose. You can see a little layer lines, you can see a little kind of ghosting and some other little kind of cosmetic errors. But overall, this is what I would consider a very successful 3D print. Just going to go ahead and remove these little bits. This is some of the kind of extra little layers that you print called a skirt. And it just makes sure that your extrusion is all kind of smooth and consistent. It also helps with something called elephant footing and a few other things that can go wrong with your print on those first layers. It's just a little extra security measure I like taking. So I'd always just start by removing that. just cleaning up by hand a little bit. Some of the maybe little pieces of filament that didn't quite bond right, or that from the skirt that got bound to it. And I'll do a bigger cleanup job on this later off camera. But we also have this little bit of support in here. As I said, I tried to minimize the amount of support needed, but this kind of shape, you're going to have to put support somewhere. It's just figuring out the orientation which you're going to get the cleanest print with the least number of supports. So this area here comes all the way through. Make sure that as it's printing that hole, that the layer lines don't kind of collapse on themselves with that overhang. I'm just going to go ahead and take that same weeding tool, just use it to kind of pry a little bit into this hole, loosen it up a little bit. I might grab a couple of my other tools that I used to get these out, but since this was right here, yeah, I think I'm going to need to grab another tool. Just give me a second. Let me try these. These are some very sharp cutters, plier style cutters. Usually I use these to clip the ends of the roll of filament to make them nice and sharp before they're going in. And I'm just going to use this right now just to kind of cut through some of this support so it's a little easier to break out. I might have to kind of poke it through from the back. Let me see if I can break this here. And here. Got a little scratch, but that's alright. Once again, this is a functional thing. It's not meant to be as pretty as some of my other prints will end up being. And I may even have to kind of drill this out, because some of this filament got pretty bonded to itself. I could have put a slightly different interfacing between the actual print and the support structure. That would have helped. But I just wanted to get this done, and I knew if I need to break away some of it later, it's not the worst thing in the world. I'm just going to grab my power drill here, and probably should set up a little bit better way of doing this. Don't recommend doing it this way. I'm not going to get this thing up to full speed, but generally you don't want to use power tools without something holding down your material. I'm just going to do this kind of nice and light and slow. See if I can just dig in a little bit without going fast enough to potentially hurt myself. Yeah. Alright. I thought I'd give it a shot, but I don't want to hurt myself, especially not on camera. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this off camera for a second and do it in a way that's a little bit safer. Alright, so I just went over to my other table where I have kind of more secure setup to be able to do this. Just clamped it down real quick. Popped a quick hole in it. And that should let me remove the rest of this filament a little easier. Yeah, see? There. Popped right out. Going to clean up this hole a little. There we go. So now that all support material is removed, we have our final part. I'm just going to take all this little scraps that I talked about earlier. I like to hold on to these scraps and eventually be able to put them in a 3D printed filament recycler. So I'm just going to gather these all up, and I have a place where I put all that spare filament. I've been saving it up for a few years. Maybe one day I'll show you guys all of the dead filament and dead projects that ended up in the filament graveyard. But now that those supports are gone, there's a few more up here. We're going to break off. These should be a lot easier because they're not like fully contained like the hole. So I can just break them off with my hand. And then the last thing is, because this was printed in place and it's a very tight tolerance, some of this may have fused a tiny little bit. Let me get focused up nice and tight on this. So some of these areas where it's nearly touching, the filament might have melted into itself a tiny, tiny little bit. Not enough to destroy it, the design, but enough that I have to give it a little bit of strength to kind of break those bonds, and it's actually pretty tight. I'm just going to kind of wiggle it back and forth. I may need to stick an instrument in there to kind of break up some of that. I can feel there's a little flex and a little cracking. So I'm just going to go ahead and see if I can loosen up that area in between, just break up some of that so it becomes a little easier. I'll be right back. Yeah, so I just took another little tool and just wedged it in there until I got a little bit of that extra filament out. And now it's working just like it should. You can hear that clicking as it goes back and forth. That's those little gears kind of locking themselves into place. Not necessarily gears, more just teeth. But it's working pretty damn well. A little stiff still, but as I do this more and more, it'll loosen up. But I want it to be pretty tight because I don't want, when my camera is mounted, I don't want it to actually, the weight of the camera to actually make it sag down. So I'd say this is a pretty successful print. We'll plug into the next part when I print that out. And I might have the whole thing done on my next stream. I might do some more of it with you guys. We'll see, but when I get the final one done, I'll be able to set up a face cam, and we'll be able to do a little bit more talking. You'll be able to see me and some of the rest of the studio. So I think that's a pretty good place to end this first stream. We were able to make a successful print together, one part of the larger piece that we'll be able to see happen over time. We were able to laser and score a few of our flower modules, and we got about half of a flower made. So we'll make this other half of flower next time as well. You'll be able to see the finished design. And we'll have a few other projects next time as well. And as we go on, we'll be just doing more interactive things. We'll try to bring some other guest artists that I know in so you can see what other people do for their creativity. And yeah, I hope to see you guys next time. Thank you for joining me on this first stream. I'll see you guys later.